Okay, here's just a little short review on how to factor quadratics. So if you needed to factor x squared minus 3x minus 10, and the ones I'm doing today do not have a greatest common factor, so you don't have to worry about a GCF, because normally that's what you'd always check for first. So because we have this trinomial, we want to factor this, I'm going to use a diamond problem, and the product part goes here, remember, and the sum goes here. So the product is this negative 10, so that's always going to go in this spot, and then the negative 3 is going to go here. You are looking for two numbers that if you multiply them, you get negative 10, and if you add them, you get negative 3. So we know one of the numbers has to be negative and one positive. So if you try a negative 5 and a positive 2, notice that when you multiply, you get negative 10. When you add them, you get negative 3. This tells you the two numbers that you're going to use when you write out your factors. So we're going to have x minus 5 and x plus 2, and that would be factored. How can you tell if you did it right? Multiply it out, FOIL it, or you can put it in a box to multiply. So x times x is x squared. Then you get a 2x and a minus 5x, which when you add those together, you get negative 3x, and then negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. So it works. So what do you do if it's not just an x squared, if you have a number out front? So what we're going to do here, and we're going to call this a modified diamond. So we're going to multiply this 2 and this 15, and it's negative. So I get negative 30 is my product. This doesn't change. This is still the sum, so a negative 7 would be the sum. So now I'm looking for two numbers that if I multiply them, I'm going to get negative 30, and if I add them, I get negative 7. So one of my numbers has to be negative, one positive. So I'm going to have a negative times a positive. And if you do a little bit of thinking, then you can figure out that it would be a negative 10 and a positive 3, because negative 10 times 3 is negative 30, and when you add them, you get negative 7. However, these numbers do not go in the parentheses. If you do a modified diamond, then you also need to do the box. So if you create this box, the 2x squared is always going to go in this spot. The constant, which is the one with no variable attached, is going to go in this box. These two numbers tell you how to break up the x's right here. So I'm going to put one of them here, so negative 10, and you got to put an x with it, and then the other one is a positive 3x. What you're going to do next is you are going to look in this first row, whoops, there we go, and factor any common factors. So notice I can take a 2 out, and I can also take an x out. Now think about, what would you multiply 2x by to get 2x squared? Well, you'd need an x right here. What would you multiply 2x by to get minus 10x? You'd need a minus 5 right here. And so x times what gives you 3x? This needs to be a plus 3. And notice how all the multiplication boxes work. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 5 is negative 10x. X times 3 is 3x. Negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. So it works. So your answer is 2x plus 3 times x minus 5. If you FOIL this to double check, and I always recommend you do that, then you could see that it will work. So on this one, it's not just an x squared, so I'm going to need to do the modified diamond in the box. So I multiply the 6 times the negative 2, I get negative 12. Remember, there's no number here, so that's like a negative 1. So then my two numbers, one's negative, one's positive. It's going to need to be a negative 4 and a positive 3. But remember, those don't go in the parentheses. We have to do the box first. This is the 6x squared. This is the minus 2. This tells me how to break up the x's. I'm going to put the minus 4x here, although it wouldn't matter if I put the 3x there. It would have still worked. Then I'm going to factor out of each row. So I can take a 2 and an x out of this, because there's a common factor of 2 with the 6 and the 4, and a common factor of x, which means this has to be 3x in order to get 6x squared when I multiply. This would have to be a minus 2 in order to get negative 4x when I multiply. This would have to be a plus 1 in order for that to work, and then I check the last box to make sure it works. So I get 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 2. Now, let me just warn you about the most common mistake students make. Oops. Is when they do the box, they go x minus 4, or I'm sorry, not the box, but the modified diamond. They say this is the answer because they forget this part. Well, as long as you always check your work, look what happens. If you do x times x, you get x squared. You don't get 6x squared. You don't even have to work it all out. Just doing the first, you get an x squared. So that can't be the answer because you got to get 6x squared. 2x times 3x is 6x squared. So if you always check your answer, then you'll never make that mistake of forgetting the box. So hopefully that helps.